Here's the old sets of manuals here, going all the way back to before PFC. It says pre-PFC. These were, if you may recall, Peter Cundall's original code was called ball for 2D code and true ball for a 3D ball, right? Those are some of his original reports. Then we had PFC came out in 1994, and for many years we actually had printed manuals. And then eventually after 2008, now we have these manuals that are embedded in the program, right? So that's built in to the program, and then there's quite extensive documentation. All the details about what's going on are described in the manuals. So here's the outer level of the tree structure. So program guide, it talks about all these different things, modeling methodology, underpinnings, etc. Inside of program mechanics, it's going to talk about some of the things that we just highlighted in my little talk here, right? Projects, there's a whole section talking about what's the idea of a project, what's the idea of data files, for example, right? Plotting, all these different things about what you can do with plotting, saving, etc., etc. Modeling concepts, we call them. We go into the program guide, it says PFC, and here's all this stuff about PFC. So here we go, PFC model objects. Remember, there's just balls, clumps, rigid blocks, walls, and then there's also contacts. They have their own subcategory here called contacts and contact models. But we look at these, and if we drill into this, into the balls, for example, it's going to have commands and fish functions. So basically, it's going to have all these different commands in there. And then it also has fish functions, which are this embedded language. It's going to allow us to access data and to change data for balls, for example. So the commands are always associated. The first word is associated with an object. So there's a ball create command, ball attribute command. There would be a separate rigid block create command, etc. And the fish functions that operate on balls, they all start with the word ball and then whatever. So here, this is the density of a ball, okay? And then of course, we have the PFC command genie, which we continually feed data files into this guy, right? Here, for example, is the ball. So we go into balls, commands, and here's all the different commands that start with the word ball. We click on one, here's the ball create command, right? This allows us to create a single ball, and these commands are always the same. They basically have they're hierarchical, right? Ball create, and now it's looking for something. Ball create ID, position, radius, etc. And then I click on radius. Oh, ball create radius, blah blah blah. In that case, ball create radius, you got to give a floating point number for which is the radius. Okay. Let me just show you this for a minute. So ball. I just want to put this on here because I want to ball create. So I'm going to go to that command F1. So ball create radius, click, right? Oh, I'm looking for a floating point number. Is there an example? Yeah. Instead of, and then I can give position X. So there, it's the X component of position. It's a floating point number. But I could also give position. Notice it says position V. That's a vector. I click on the V. Oh, V, vector. A vector is expressed blah blah blah. Now it talks about 2D, 3D vectors, right? So it's telling me the different things. You know, some things are it's looking for a vector like, you know, XYZ. Otherwise, it's just looking for a single floating point. ID, looking for an integer, right? Okay, so that's the idea of the commands. Here's a fish function, ball.create. And again, we'll talk about fish tomorrow. But here we go, ball.create. This is a function. You have to tell it which ball. So you give it a pointer to a ball, and then it's going to, ball create. You give it these numbers, right? F, you give it the radius, you give it the position vector. If you want, you can optionally, that's the square, that's what these little things are. It's an optional parameter, right? And when you're done, this function is going to return a pointer to that ball. That's why that's on the left-hand side. So you would say, my ball equals ball.create. blah, blah, blah. And then you can do things with my ball because you have to have a way of referring to it. So we call that a pointer. And then there's extensive examples in the documentation. So there's tutorials, verification problems is where we try to have something that we have like a closed form solution and then we compare the results, right? And so for example, we go into examples and these things are data files. These are they were installed with the program. And we can drill down PFC tutorials, and I'll show you this in a second. We're going to get to a tutorial called balls in a box. And so there is going to be in the manual balls in a box, a whole big, 6-page thing that is slowly describing that data file and is saying, now we're doing this, now we're doing that, look at this line, etc., etc. So the way you access that is you go into the help up here and you say examples, and now it should tell you, oh, program data files 2D, PFC. And I'm going to go into tutorials. And one of them here is balls in a box. So I click, there's a project, balls in a box project. So I double click it. Now it says, wait a minute, you've got a current project that you've been working on. Should I save changes to it? No, we don't care. Discard. I'm going to go to layout wide. And again, here's that example. So now I can run it and I can look at, whatever it's going to do. And again, that would be in the manual. So I go into PFC again and I say help and documentation. That puts up the separate screen with the manual. So let's go in there, PFC, examples, tutorials, balls in a box. There we go. So, and then it talks all about this thing here. It talks about those commands, right? It talks about the domain, etc., etc. So there's quite an extensive set of examples in there that guide you through what's going on and how to do it. You can see all this stuff. And then at the end, usually in the manual part, it'll have selected data files and talk about what they're doing here. Okay.